Welcome back to our series on image sequences. In the second video, I'm going to be looking at the graphic on the right, the kind of animated letter forms. And we're going to be focusing on, to create that, we're going to focus on sequencing After Effects layers. Let's have a look at the assets that we've got to work with. So on the desktop, I have a single PSD here, and I'll just open that up in Photoshop. Now that single PSD has a series of over 20 layers in it, and it's artwork that I generated from Procreate. So I was on my iPad and drawing with the pen, etc., and creating a series of layers. And you can see here that 20 odd layers here, so I just hide them. Get down to layer number 1. You can see that I'm kind of just modifying that sketch just a little bit in every one of those layers. And that's pretty easy to kind of generate in Procreate, and indeed it would be just as easy to produce in Photoshop itself. Now, it doesn't kind of matter what the content is. The important thing is that you've got a series of kind of assets, sequential assets, that you've layered up together in one PSD. Now, close that down. We'll go back over to After Effects and we'll import that PSD. As I said, I made that in Procreate, exported the layers as a PSD, and I can import that PSD into After Effects. So we'll go File, Import, and we'll navigate to that PSD. And I am going to retain the layer sizes as I kind of normally would and create composition and go OK. So here we go. Here's our composition, and you can see in the layers of my timeline that I've got a heap of layers there, which is great. Now it created a 2-second composition by default because that was my previous increment. You could change that if you wanted to in your composition settings. Now what we need to do is space out each of those layers across time. I've got a 2-second timeline here, so what I'm thinking about doing is kind of making each one of those layers visible for 2 frames at a time, and then showing the next one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, I might delete the background layer because we don't need that at the moment, and change the change the background color of that composition to white so we can see our graphics. Now I need to shorten how long each of those layers exists, and I could kind of manually drag each one in, so on and so forth. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to frame 1, and I'm going to hit Command A on the keyboard to select all of my layers, and then I'm going to hit Option and the square bracket key on the keyboard, and that will trim all of those instances or all of those layers down to just 2 frames. So just doing that again, selecting all of the layers, and it matters which direction you select these. So I select it all, so it's going to select it from 1 up to layer 25. You could manually select those and it would have a difference on the order of the sequence. Anyway, to trim them down to 2 seconds, I'll move my timeline indicator to the 1 second or 1 frame mark and hit Option, square bracket on the keyboard, and that'll trim all those guys down to 2 frames. Now we need to sequence them across the timeline, and that's pretty easy. We can do that under Layer, and it is animation, keyframe assistant, and then sequence layers. And we can do that quicker by right-clicking on all of those selected layers, going to the keyframe assistant, and then sequencing those layers. We're not going to overlap in this instance, but bear in mind that is something that you can do. You can kind of crossfade layers into each other. I'm going to click OK. And now you can see that all of our layers are sequenced across that 2-second interval. And if I preview that, you can see that that word sort of has a bit of life breathed into it. Okay, so that's sequencing After Effects layers over time.